Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford. There is a timeless truth hidden inside those simple words, one that reaches far beyond success or failure. It speaks to the invisible relationship between consciousness and reality. It reminds us that before the world becomes something we can touch with our hands, it first becomes something we hold within ourselves. Every visible result begins as an invisible assumption. Every transformation begins as a silent decision. And today, I want you to consider something that may completely change the way you see your life. What if the greatest force shaping your future is not your circumstances, your past, your education, or even your opportunities? What if it is the identity you quietly accept every single day? What if life has been waiting, not for you to struggle harder, but for you to become someone different within? Most people spend years trying to convince life to change. They beg for better circumstances. They wait for proof before they believe. They say, when I become successful, I will feel confident. When I find love, I will finally feel worthy. When money comes, I will live without fear. But look carefully at this pattern. It places your inner state at the mercy of the outside world. It gives circumstances complete authority over your spirit. And as long as your inner world is following your outer world, you will remain trapped inside the same cycle, repeating different versions of the same story. There is another way to live. It is quiet. It is invisible. Yet it is more powerful than endless effort. It begins with one courageous decision to act as if the reality you desire is already becoming the foundation of your identity. This is not pretending. It is not denying present circumstances. It is choosing which truth deserves your loyalty. The present may show you limitations, but your consciousness does not have to kneel before appearances. Every great transformation in history began with someone refusing to let present evidence define future possibility. Think about the person you hope to become. Perhaps you imagine someone who walks with peace instead of anxiety, someone who speaks with confidence instead of hesitation, someone who creates abundance instead of constantly fearing lack. Now ask yourself an honest question. If that version of you already existed today, how would they think about this morning? How would they respond to disappointment? How would they carry themselves through uncertainty? How would they interpret rejection? Would they see every obstacle as proof of failure? Or would they quietly recognize it as another step towards something greater? The difference between your present self and your future self is rarely found in talent. It is found in identity. Identity shapes perception, perception shapes decisions, decisions shape habits, and habits quietly build destiny. Every action you repeat whispers a message to your subconscious about who you believe yourself to be. If you continue acting from the identity of someone who expects disappointment, life keeps reflecting that expectation. If you begin acting from the quiet certainty of someone who already belongs to the future they seek, something remarkable begins to shift. Not only do your actions change, but your awareness changes. You begin noticing opportunities that were always present, but invisible to the old version of you. Have you ever noticed how two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different meanings? One sees failure and decides they are not enough. The other sees instruction and becomes wiser. The event remained the same, only consciousness changed. This is why your inner conversation matters far more than many people realize. Every moment you are interpreting life. Every interpretation either strengthens limitation or expands possibility. The world often teaches us to wait until we feel ready before taking courageous action. Yet readiness is rarely something that arrives on its own. It is something that grows each time you behave in harmony with the person you intend to become. Confidence is not the reward at the end of the journey. It is the companion that slowly appears because you kept walking despite uncertainty. Peace is not something the world hands you after everything becomes perfect. Peace is a decision you practice before perfection ever arrives. Imagine planting a seed in rich soil. You do not dig it up every morning to check whether it has grown. You trust the unseen process. Beneath the surface, invisible activity is already unfolding. Roots are forming where your eyes cannot see. Life is organizing itself according to a hidden intelligence. Your inner assumptions work the same way. The moment you begin consistently living from a higher identity, invisible changes begin before visible evidence appears. Most people quit because they mistake silence for failure. They do not realize that the deepest transformations are almost always invisible before they become undeniable. There is extraordinary power in emotional consistency. Anyone can believe for 5 minutes. Anyone can feel inspired after hearing encouraging words. But can you maintain your inner direction when circumstances appear unchanged? Can you continue speaking to yourself with dignity after rejection? Can you continue expecting good while standing inside uncertainty? That is where transformation becomes real. The world cannot easily shake someone whose identity no longer depends on temporary conditions. Many people misunderstand faith. They imagine it is merely hoping something good will happen someday. But authentic faith changes behavior today. It changes posture today. It changes decisions today. It influences the tone of your voice, the quality of your thoughts, and the standards you accept for yourself. Faith is not passive waiting. It is active alignment. It is waking each morning already carrying the emotional atmosphere of the future you are choosing. Notice how often fear disguises itself as logic. It says, be realistic. It says, don't expect too much. It reminds you of every past disappointment until you begin believing your history is stronger than your potential. But history only has the authority you continue giving it. Yesterday cannot make today's decisions unless you invite it into your thinking. Every sunrise quietly announces the same invitation: become someone new. Not because the past never happened, but because consciousness is never permanently imprisoned by memory. Your imagination is one of the greatest gifts you possess. Sadly, many people use it only to rehearse disaster. They imagine rejection before conversations happen. They imagine failure before beginning. They imagine loss before receiving anything. They unknowingly practice negative futures with incredible dedication. Imagine redirecting that same creative power. Imagine seeing yourself responding with wisdom, walking with confidence, speaking with calm authority, embracing opportunities that once frightened you. These inner rehearsals slowly become emotional familiarity. And what becomes familiar inside eventually feels natural outside. Life responds in remarkable ways to those who stop asking permission to become who they truly are. Doors begin opening that once appeared invisible. Relationships begin reflecting new standards. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer filtered through insecurity. It almost seems as though reality itself starts cooperating with your transformation. But perhaps reality has not changed first. Perhaps you have finally become someone capable of receiving what was always possible. This shift does not happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens through countless invisible choices that nobody applauds. It happens every time you refuse to entertain thoughts that diminish your worth. It happens every time you choose gratitude instead of resentment, vision instead of fear, discipline instead of emotional chaos. These small victories accumulate quietly until one day people call you fortunate, never realizing they are witnessing the harvest of an identity that was cultivated long before the results appeared. And this is where the journey becomes even more profound, because the greatest challenge is not learning how to imagine a different future. It is learning how to remain faithful to that unseen reality when everything around you still insists on telling the moment. You only remain faithful to an unseen reality. You discover something about yourself that no external achievement could ever reveal. You discover that your greatest power has never been your ability to control circumstances. It has always been your ability to choose the meaning you assign to them. This is where so many people unknowingly surrender their creative influence. They believe circumstances speak first, and they must simply react. But what if your response is actually the beginning of a new reality? What if every reaction is quietly planting the emotional seeds of tomorrow? Imagine waking each morning before the world has a chance to tell you who you are, before the news fills your mind with fear, before old memories remind you of past disappointments, before social media invites you to compare your journey with someone else's. There is a sacred moment between waking and fully entering the day. In that moment, your consciousness is soft, open, and deeply impressionable. Most people waste it by immediately reconnecting with yesterday. They revisit old worries, old frustrations, old identities, and unknowingly carry them into another sunrise. Then they wonder why life feels repetitive. Instead, imagine greeting each day from the standpoint of the person you have chosen to become. Before your feet touch the ground, feel gratitude that cannot yet be justified by visible evidence. Let your heart become familiar with abundance before your bank account reflects it. Let your mind become familiar with peace before your circumstances become peaceful. Let your spirit become familiar with confidence before the world applauds you. This inner rehearsal is not an escape from reality, it is preparation for it. The human mind naturally seeks evidence. It constantly asks, where is the proof? But consciousness works differently. It asks, what are you willing to accept as true before proof appears? Every invention existed first in someone's imagination. Every masterpiece was once invisible. Every meaningful relationship began before two strangers ever met. Reality has always honored what first lived within the unseen. Yet we often demand physical confirmation before granting ourselves permission to believe. In doing so, we reverse the natural order of creation. There is a quiet confidence that develops when you stop measuring your progress by appearances alone. You begin noticing subtle changes that others overlook. Your reactions become calmer. Your conversations become more intentional. You stop rushing because you no longer believe your future is running away from you. Patience is no longer painful because you understand that what is growing beneath the surface requires time to become visible. A tree does not apologize for taking seasons to mature. The ocean does not hurry its tides. Nature itself teaches that lasting strength develops through steady, unseen processes. One of the greatest obstacles you will encounter is the temptation to return to familiar thinking. The old identity never disappears without resistance. It whispers that nothing has changed. It reminds you of every past mistake. It points toward temporary setbacks as if they are permanent conclusions. But those thoughts are echoes, not truth. They are habits of perception that once protected you from disappointment, yet now keep you from possibility. You do not have to argue with them. You simply stop agreeing with them. There is remarkable freedom in refusing to define yourself by moments that no longer exist. Too many people introduce themselves to life through yesterday's failures. They say, I am the person who was betrayed. I am the person who lost everything. I am the person who always struggles. Without realizing it, they wear old experiences like permanent names. But experiences are events, not identities. A storm may pass through the sky, but it does not become the sky itself. In the same way, hardship may visit your life, but it does not become your essence unless you continue identifying with it. When you begin acting from a higher identity, people around you may not immediately understand. Some will remind you of who you used to be. Others may even become uncomfortable because your transformation silently challenges the limits they have accepted for themselves. Do not mistake their confusion for your failure. Growth often appears strange to those committed to familiarity. Continue walking with quiet dignity. You are not seeking approval. You are becoming aligned with a deeper truth. You may also notice that opportunities begin arriving in unexpected forms. Sometimes they arrive disguised as challenges requiring courage you did not know you possessed. Sometimes they appear through conversations that seem ordinary at first, but later change the direction of your life. Sometimes they emerge after what looked like a painful ending. This is why it is dangerous to judge events too quickly. What appears to be loss may actually be redirection. What feels like delay may be preparation. What seems like rejection may be protection from a path that was never meant to fulfill you. Acting as if does not mean forcing artificial happiness. It does not require denying sadness or pretending pain does not exist. Authentic transformation welcomes every emotion without allowing temporary feelings to become permanent identities. You can acknowledge fear without surrendering your future to it. You can experience disappointment without concluding that hope is gone. Emotional honesty and spiritual strength are not enemies. They walk together. The difference is that one feeling no longer decides the direction of your life. As your inner world changes, you will discover something unexpected. The desires that once felt desperate begin to feel peaceful. You no longer chase them from emptiness. You approach them from fullness. There is a profound difference between seeking something because you believe it will complete you and welcoming it because you already feel complete within yourself. Desperation pushes opportunities away because it is rooted in lack. Inner certainty attracts them because it is rooted in wholeness. This is why your self concept quietly influences every relationship, every opportunity, and every decision. The world often responds less to your words than to the silent expectations you carry. If deep within you believe you are worthy of respect, you naturally establish healthier boundaries. If you believe your contribution has value, you stop shrinking your voice. If you believe life supports your growth, you become willing to take inspired action instead of waiting endlessly for perfect conditions. None of this happens because the universe is rewarding performance. It happens because your perception determines what you notice, pursue, accept, and create. The same door that once seemed invisible suddenly appears because your awareness has expanded. The same opportunity that once intimidated you now feels natural because your identity has matured. Reality often appears to change dramatically when, in truth, consciousness has simply learned to recognize what was previously overlooked. So continue choosing your inner state with care. Speak to yourself as someone entrusted with a meaningful purpose. Protect your imagination from constant fear. Guard your attention, because attention is the currency with which you purchase future experiences. Every thought you repeatedly entertain is quietly asking life to become more familiar. Make sure the conversations within your own mind are worthy of the future you hope to inhabit. There will come moments when nothing around you seems to confirm your vision. Those are not moments to abandon your new identity. They are invitations to deepen it. For it is easy to believe when the evidence is visible. The true transformation begins when your inner conviction becomes stronger than your outer conditions. That is the invisible threshold very few people cross. Yet those who do often discover that life begins responding in ways they once believed were impossible. And once you understand what truly happens on the other side of that threshold, you will never look at your thoughts, your imagination, or your daily choices in the same way again. There is a quiet moment that arrives in every person's journey, a moment that cannot be seen from the outside, but changes everything within. It is the moment you stop asking whether your new way of thinking is working and begin living as though there is no alternative. This is where your inner world stops negotiating with doubt. You no longer wake up wondering if life will eventually become different. Instead, you wake up carrying the calm certainty that your transformation has already begun, even if the physical world is still catching up. This shift is subtle, yet it is one of the most powerful changes a human being can experience, because certainty creates a stability that circumstances cannot easily shake. Many people believe that greatness is born from extraordinary moments, but in truth, greatness is built through ordinary moments that are approached with extraordinary awareness. The way you make your morning coffee, the way you greet a stranger, the way you respond to inconvenience, the way you speak to yourself after making a mistake. These moments seem insignificant, yet they reveal the identity you are living from. A person who has truly embraced abundance does not only feel abundant when money arrives, they carry generosity into ordinary conversations. A person who has embraced peace does not wait for silence around them. They become the source of silence within themselves. A person who has embraced confidence does not depend on applause. They move with quiet assurance even when no one is watching. Your daily life is not interrupting your spiritual growth. It is your spiritual growth. Every ordinary moment is an opportunity to practice being the person you have chosen to become. Waiting for dramatic opportunities only delays your transformation. The greatest rehearsal for your future is the life you are living today. If you cannot embody gratitude in small blessings, abundance in modest circumstances, or faith during minor uncertainties, then greater opportunities will only magnify the inner patterns you already carry. This is why discipline becomes an expression of love rather than punishment. You are no longer forcing yourself to think positively. You are protecting the garden of your consciousness. Imagine owning a beautiful garden filled with rare flowers. Would you allow weeds to grow without removing them? Of course not. Yet many people allow fear, resentment, envy, and self criticism to grow unchecked within their minds. Then they wonder why their emotional landscape feels heavy. Every thought you entertain repeatedly is either planting flowers or feeding weeds. You cannot always control which thoughts knock on the door of your mind, but you can decide which ones receive a place at your table. There will be days when old emotions unexpectedly return. You may feel anxiety that you thought you had overcome. You may hear the familiar voice of insecurity, whispering once again. Do not mistake its return as evidence that you have failed. Old patterns often make one final attempt to reclaim your attention before they dissolve completely. Think of an echo in a vast canyon. Even after the original sound has stopped, the echo continues for a while. Your old identity works much the same way. It echoes through habit, but an echo has no creative power unless you answer it. Instead of becoming frustrated with yourself, observe those moments with compassion. Smile gently and recognize them for what they are, reminders of where you once lived, not predictions of where you are going. The more calmly you refuse to identify with those old thoughts, the weaker they become. Eventually, they lose the emotional charge they once carried. They become like old photographs stored in a drawer. They belong to your history, but they no longer define your present. One of the most liberating realizations you can have is that your value has never depended on achievement. Long before you reached any goal, earned any recognition, or received anyone's approval, your existence already carried immeasurable worth. Goals are wonderful. Success is meaningful. Prosperity can create beautiful opportunities. But none of these things create your value. They simply express what was already present within you. When you finally understand this, striving transforms into joyful creation. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are allowing your worth to express itself. Notice how different this feels. The person trying to prove themselves lives with constant tension. Every setback feels personal. Every criticism feels devastating. Every delay feels like failure. But the person who knows their inner value approaches life differently. They can learn without shame. They can fail without losing dignity. They can begin again without feeling broken. Their confidence is rooted in being rather than achieving. This kind of confidence cannot be taken away because it was never borrowed from circumstances. There is another truth that becomes increasingly clear as your consciousness expands. You begin to realize that the world mirrors not only your beliefs about success, but also your beliefs about yourself. If you secretly believe that happiness must always be followed by disappointment, you may unconsciously sabotage joyful moments. If you believe love always ends in pain, you may push away genuine connection before it has a chance to deepen. These hidden assumptions quietly influence countless decisions without your awareness. This is why honest self reflection is essential. Not reflection filled with guilt, but reflection filled with curiosity. Ask yourself, what story have I been repeating about my life? What identity have I accepted without questioning? If I had never been told who I was supposed to be, who would I choose to become today? These questions open doors that force never can. Awareness dissolves limitations that struggle often strengthens. As you continue living from this new identity, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop chasing signs because your own transformation becomes the greatest sign. You notice yourself smiling more easily. You recover from disappointment more quickly. Your decisions become clearer because they are no longer clouded by constant fear. People begin responding differently to your presence, not because you have changed your appearance, but because your energy carries a different message. Calm invites trust. Confidence invites opportunity. Gratitude invites abundance. Peace invites wisdom. This change often appears invisible until one day you look back and realize you are no longer the person who began this journey. Situations that once controlled your emotions no longer have the same power. Conversations that once intimidated you now feel natural. Dreams that once seemed impossible begin to feel inevitable. You realize that life did not suddenly become kinder. You became stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the person you were always capable of being. Yet there is one final lesson that separates temporary inspiration from lasting transformation. It is the understanding that acting as if is not something you do until your desires appear. It becomes the way you live. You do not return to fear after success arrives. You do not abandon gratitude after abundance comes. You do not stop imagining because your dreams have been fulfilled. The inner state that created one beautiful chapter becomes the foundation for every chapter that follows. When this becomes your way of living, you no longer experience life as something happening to you. You begin experiencing it as something unfolding through you. Every encounter becomes meaningful. Every challenge becomes an invitation to deepen your awareness. Every victory becomes an opportunity for humility rather than pride. You understand that the greatest miracle was never the change in your circumstances. The greatest miracle was the awakening of the consciousness that made those changes possible. And as this realization settles into your heart, another question quietly emerges. A question that has the power to transform not only what you receive from life, but also what you are destined to give. For once you fully understand the true nature of the identity you have chosen, you will discover that your influence extends far beyond your own success, touching the lives of people you may never even realize you have inspired. And that is where the deepest part of this journey begins. The deepest transformation is never measured by the number of dreams you accomplish. It is measured by the person you become while moving toward them. There comes a moment when you realize that the house, the career, the wealth, the relationship, the recognition, these were never the true destination. They were symbols pointing towards something far greater. They were invitations to awaken the version of yourself that had been waiting beneath years of fear, doubt, and limitation. The outer rewards are beautiful, but they are only reflections. The real miracle is that you no longer need them to convince you of your worth. This is why the most fulfilled people carry a quiet presence that cannot be manufactured. They do not need to announce their confidence, because it is woven into the way they live. They do not seek constant validation, because they have already settled the question of who they are within themselves. They understand that every day offers a new opportunity to remain faithful to the identity they have chosen. They know that life is not asking them to become someone else. It is asking them to stop pretending to be someone smaller than they truly are. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast mountain valley just before sunrise. The world is still, the air is cool. Everything appears quiet, yet beneath that silence, creation is already unfolding. Birds prepare to sing. Rivers continue to flow. Flowers slowly turn toward the coming light. None of nature doubts the arrival of the morning. None of it wonders whether the sun has forgotten its promise. It simply remains aligned with the rhythm of life. What if you approached your dreams with that same quiet certainty? What if you stopped treating your future as something uncertain and began treating it as something you are steadily growing into? Too often people exhaust themselves by trying to force results. They grip their desires so tightly that they create tension instead of trust. But have you noticed that the strongest things in life do not grow through panic? A tree does not strain to become taller every hour. A river does not argue with the rocks in its path. The stars do not rush across the night sky. There is power in steady movement. There is wisdom in patient confidence. When your inner state is rooted in certainty, action becomes inspired instead of desperate. You still work, you still learn, you still improve. But now your effort comes from confidence, not fear. You are expressing your identity rather than trying to earn it. There will always be voices telling you to lower your expectations. Some of those voices will come from people around you. Others will come from memories you still carry. The loudest voice, however, is often the one within. The old identity that occasionally whispers, maybe this is too good to be true. Maybe you should prepare for disappointment. When that voice appears, do not fight it with anger. Meet it with understanding. Smile at it as you would smile at an old traveler who no longer knows the road ahead. Thank it for trying to protect you, then continue walking toward the life you have already accepted in your heart. You must remember that every lasting change in history first appeared unreasonable to someone. Every great creator, every visionary, Every person who transformed their life had to believe in something that others could not yet see. They had to remain loyal to an invisible possibility before it became visible reality. If they had waited for unanimous approval, nothing extraordinary would have happened.